Welcome to Inside Farm Life, your weekly connection to agriculture newsmakers, hot-button industry issues, educational features, and the best in true country music. Now, here's your host, Brent Adams.
Well, here we are. We're back again. Welcome to another episode of Inside Farm Life, presented tonight by AGCO. You can go check out all the great AGCO brands like Challenger, Fendt, and Massey Ferguson, and more at agcocorp.com. And tonight we want to welcome in Texas singer-songwriter Randy C. Newman, whose most recent album, Lufkin, is a real work of art. We can't wait to talk about that, as well as his touring plans and some of his songs that recently well, one song in particular recently landed on an album by country music great Ronnie Milsap. We're going to talk about that. But Randy, welcome into Inside Farm Life.
It's good to be here and be from Texas and be with you guys right now on Farm Life. Yeah,
I love it. We've got a big following in Texas, and everything is bigger in Texas, including this country music that is still the true country music variety. So
sure,
we're excited to have you here. Before we get going tonight, man, you want to share a song with us?
Sure. This is off my new album that I released this year. This is one of my favorites because this is a song about me and my dad going fishing. It's called Daddy, I Want to Go Fishing. A million stars were in the sky, 4 a.m. on the 5th of July. We headed out to Toledo Bend, me and Daddy going fishing again. He said we'll be there in an hour or so. Charlie Rich was on the radio. I said, I hope that we get lucky today. He nodded his head, then I heard him say, if the good Lord's willing and the mercury runs, we'll be on the water before the sun. With rods, reels, and spinner baits, we'll cast our troubles out into the lake. But life is a whole lot better when the fishing's fine. There's a little bit of heaven at the end of that line. Now we pulled in the Choctaw Camp, eased that bass boat down the range. I held the rope while it parked the truck. I called myself waking up. He got us out to our honey hole. How he finds it, I'll never know. I said, all these trees look alike. He said, son, you can trust an old Indian guy. When the good Lord's willing and the mercury runs, we'll be on the water before the sun. With rods, reels, and spinner baits, we'll cast our troubles out into the lake. Life is a whole lot better when the fishing's fine. There's a little bit of heaven at the end of that line. When I think about my daddy, I think about fishing. And I think about fishing every day. When I die and leave this place, I want to see my daddy's face. Say, get the rods and reels, son. We're heading to the lake. A million stars were in the sky, 4 a.m. on the 5th of July. We headed out to Toledo Bend, me and Daddy going fishing again. La 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 la. Come on, let's go fishing. La 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 la. Grab the rods and reels, how do you feel? Son, don't you want to go fishing? Hey, Daddy, I want to go fishing. There you go.
I love that. Just one magnificent song out of an album of magnificent songs there.
Oh, thank you.
So to understand your story, we need to go back to your childhood here. I understand you were born in Memphis, Tennessee, and then ended up in Humble, Texas, just outside of Houston, where you started recording at age 15. What was it that drew you to music?
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm a painter. I like to paint pictures and everything, and that was what my passion was, so to speak. And I started singing just because it got to be sort of a joke when I was a little kid for my folks' friends. They'd come over, and so I'd get out and I'd do a Louis Armstrong impression, and I'd do a Tom Jones or an Elvis Presley impression, and they got a kick out of it. And I thought, well, hey, there must be something to this. So I started just doing it kind of as a silly joke, and then the joke got a little more serious when I started writing songs, and I picked up the guitar and started playing it. And my mother, this was her idea. I was in a little band and we were singing together, and I came home one day and told her that we were all going to get instruments. And when she asked me what I was going to play, I said the drums, and she says, "Oh, no, you're not. You're going to play the guitar like Elvis Presley." So you see who won that battle. It's okay. Every time I see a drummer show up to a gig, I thank Mom for not having to carry all that equipment.
Well,
so
kudos to you for sticking with it.
Yeah, I did. It just kind of worked for me. So I just stayed with it. And the more that I did, the more that I liked it. And so I still paint. I still do that to this day, but started writing songs and getting serious about it. So my folks were behind me, so they kind of helped me get into the Houston music scene a little bit, because they knew a few people. My dad knew some folks that knew some musicians who recorded there. So one thing led to another, and then my dad introduced me to a guy he went to high school with by the name of Archie Yancey, who was a big local DJ there in Houston. And my dad didn't really remember Arch that well, but Arch remembered my dad real well, because my dad was an all-Memphis, all-Tennessee high school football player. And so he was a big hero in high school to Arch. So Arch was just tickled to death to do something with me. And it worked out real good. He helped me get my first couple of records recorded. I got introduced to some folks in Nashville and made a couple of records. And then he started playing them. So I got some Texas airplay along the way. I'm still 15, 16 years old by this point. So I'm having fun with it. It's a big deal. And then Arch starts inviting me out to play his regular show that he would have at Gilley's nightclub. So I got to play Gilley's nightclub for about a year or so when I was around 15, 16, a little bit at 17. Every Thursday night, I'd get up and I'd do a couple of songs. Arch had introduced me, and that kind of helped me kind of figure out how all that worked too, as far as like being on a real stage in a real environment where people were listening and having a good time and stuff. So I liked all of it. So I just kept after it, and one thing led to another. And I moved to Nashville because I thought, well, the Houston music scene really isn't for me. I need to go to Nashville because they're making really great records there. And I was a big fan of Ronnie Milsap at the time, but I was also a big fan of Willie Nelson. But I couldn't really get into the Texas music scene. I didn't have the. Let me see. I was kind of a straight-laced, clean-cut guy. I wasn't a doper. I was more of a roper. So I headed to Nashville, where I didn't have to be what you might say live a whiskey drinking, lurid lifestyle in order to get into the music business. So I got there, and I was playing at an amusement park there, and I got asked to be on the Grand Ole Opry. So I did an Opry performance with Roy Acuff that first summer I was in Nashville. So things were going real good. I stayed in Nashville for quite a long time. And the one thing I can say about Nashville is, to anybody who's a musician, especially if you're a songwriter and you want to make records, whether you're going to go there and somebody's going to do something for you, or you're going to get something going, which might help your career or maybe even make you into a person who's on a record label or on television, just remember, if you want to learn how to make great records and learn how to write great songs, Nashville is one of the best places to do it, because the men and the women there who write songs, they craft music amazingly great. It's very, very it's not complicated, and it's not predictable. It's all about, the ones who are really the great ones. It's all about how the thing feels and what it's saying, and if it's something a little different. And of course, the records that you learn how to make there, you can learn from the greatest engineers and musicians and producers. And if you train your ears well enough, then you can go off and you can kind of do what I do, which is I make my own records, and I feel really good about what I make because of my experience in Nashville. So that's kind of the Nashville. That's my advertisement for going to Nashville. But things are working out good. I had a group that I joined up with. We were called the Knott Brothers, and we started traveling around the world. We went to Saudi Arabia a couple times and different places like that, the Middle East, Europe, of course, played a lot in the United States, everywhere. And we toured a lot. And it was another one of those things where, like many things that people who in the music industry understand, you talk about deals and you get close to deals, and sometimes you even ink the deals, but a lot of times the paper kind of goes away before the work begins to start. So, and that happened for the Knott Brothers. It actually happened for me when I was 16 because I got pretty close to RCA Records. They were pretty interested. So I've had so many misses in the music industry, though. I tell people all the time, I think I've been lucky enough to not be successful that where it didn't ruin it for me. I'm still having fun with it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a pretty common story. And I think it is what you make of it. And that's one thing I was curious about when you talk about that, and we'll digress a little bit here, but the music, since you came to Nashville to today, has changed dramatically in terms of what is being put out, but the creativity and the process behind it, aside from the technology, hasn't, and it still requires that creativity and just that inspiration to make good music.
Well, just one more thing about the music industry. There's one thing that people, a lot of times people like me are guilty of this, which I've tried to be conscious of it. When you're listening to newer music, something that's out right now, you have to understand that not only is it out there and being promoted because there is a market for it. The reason why there is a market for it is because of what's come prior to it being out there. In other words, what I'm saying is Nashville isn't like is like any other form of entertainment or like any other product. It's always influenced by its demand for the supply. And so people who I've heard them, oh, well, that's not country. That's not country. I'm like going, well, you can't say that, because I've heard that. I've been around Nashville enough to have heard that in every decade and in every half a decade. It always happens that way. And the reason why is because a lot of times the people who are the mainstays or the people who've been listening to music for a while, they hear something new and it immediately sounds foreign to them. What they don't understand is the people who are creating that music and the people who are buying that music actually came from the same place. Because right now, for instance, I'll just give you an example. If you listen to maybe the top 20 records out of Nashville, you're going to hear songs that have the grooves and the feels and the cadences in the lyrical things. They're all influenced by hip hop music. Okay. That means that the guys and the girls who are writing these songs are probably of the age where 10, 15 years ago, they were listening to Jay-Z. They were listening to Eminem. They were listening to hip hop music because they were in junior high and high school. That's what they listened to. They liked country music because they were from the country, but they learned how to shape that sound that was in their head to something that's country. And that's why that works. And that's the same audience that they're basically selling it to. They're the same people who went to high school and junior high when those pop records were being played. So everything follows that progression. If you're going to say, well, what is country? Okay, country is basically just a very honest, true thing. It's what it is. You can wrap it up in, not to coin a phrase, you can package it any way that you can. But if it's not honest and good, then it won't matter, and it's not going to go anywhere. And you really can't call it country. So the best country songs have some honesty and feeling in them. And okay, so it's got a hip hop beat, or it's got a this. You know what? You got to have some flash in that thing. Hank Williams came to town. He would write these depressing songs, and Fred Rose would sit down and say, Hank, we got to put some vanilla in there, son. We can't have it. It can't all be pepper. He said, you got to put some vanilla in them songs. So about half of Hank Williams' hits, they don't have Fred Rose's name on it, but Fred Rose actually helped Hank shape those into things that people would listen to. Yeah. Because the first versions of those songs, if you ever heard them, you'd go, my gosh, this guy sounds like he's going to commit suicide right after he gets done with his song. Okay. So it's the same thing. Got to have some vanilla. That's what people want. People love that flavor. So that's kind of that's my sermon for music and why I believe that it turns over and it does the way it does. So right. I'm saying nothing wrong with it. So.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I just had this conversation with somebody a couple of days ago, and they were trying to sell me on the fact that a popular rock and roll band of the 80s, which I won't get into the band name, but they tried to sell me on the fact that this band was probably more country than rock and roll. And it really got me to thinking, how do you define what country is?
It's just something that's honest and true, and if it hits people where they live, then that's the honest and true thing. And if people are listening to Don't Stop Believing by Journey and that hits them where they live, that's more of a country thing. That's not believe me, that's not something from outer space or something, because it happened to be something that was popular on rock radio in the 70s. Doesn't mean that Jason Aldean's not going to get up and sing it and the audience isn't going to go crazy over it, because he's appealing to his listeners. He's saying something that they want to feel. They want to feel something. Music is not, we're not selling lyrics and we're not selling notes. We're selling a feeling is what we sell. And however it is that you can convey that feeling to your audience, that's it. Listen, that's the warhead, that's the missile, that's the fuel, that's the entire weapon. That's it. How you convey that feeling to your audience. That's all it is. So I believe me, hanging around Nashville for the last, 10 years, I hung around a town a lot. I experienced and I saw a lot of things happen. I was going, well, if this is what sells beer and this is what people come here to hear, great. It's all good. I'm not going to do it because I'm going to do Angel Flying Too Close to the Ground by Willie Nelson, right. And there'll be somebody listening to that too. So there you go.
Well, you brought up Willie and you brought up Hank Williams. Who were some of your musical heroes growing up?
My first, and oddly enough, I'll go ahead and name it. One of my first records I listened to all the time was Creedence Clearwater Revival's Cosmo's Factory. And I think what really appealed to me about that is there's two songs on there that are like very old songs from Sun Records. One is Ooby Dooby that was recorded by Roy Orbison. And the other one is a very early RCA cover of an Elvis song, My Baby Left Me. And when I heard that rockabilly guitar sound and the stuff that John Fogerty was doing, it just blew my mind. I thought, what is this? I didn't realize that had existed like 15 or 20 years prior to him actually recording it. But see, he was influenced by blues and by rockabilly. So that really got me into listening to music a lot. So anything I gravitated towards kind of had that guitar thing to it, either an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar. Henceforth, I had to end up playing the guitar. So I listened to John Denver when I was a kid. And then when my brother went off to college, he came back home with an album called Shotgun Willie. And that was it for me. I was all in on Texas music and on Willie Nelson. And I couldn't hear enough Willie Nelson songs to save my life because everyone I heard I just thought were brilliant, So to this day, I cite him as like, one of the best, influences that I think is out there, not just for me, but for anybody who really wants to write songs and wants to do something a little different. He did something different, and people in Nashville really, they kind of turned their back on him for that. They're like, well, no, this is too different. We can't do anything about this, Yeah. So, but he found a way. See, he found a way. So that was right. Good.
Well, and what a treat that he's still getting into some of his passion projects there and leaving that legacy. There's some amazing stuff there that he's done here in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Yeah. Last man standing.
Absolutely. And still going
all those guys from the Austin Sound, most of them are all gone. He's really the only one left.
Yeah.
You can Asleep at the Wheel. Those guys are still doing stuff, but there's not many of them that are left that were the true staples of that sound. So God bless them.
50th anniversary of Asleep at the Wheel, man. They are still going, still fun to listen to. And
yeah, they're going to be here in Lufkin in September. I might have to go catch them. So
that'd be great, man. Love me some Ray Benson. Asleep at the Wheel. We got Deb checking in tonight here. Just want to share this real quick. She agrees with your assessment of what is country music here. So thank you so much, Deb, for checking in. So she spent part of her life on the south side of Chicago and work. So it's and that's the thing. That's an interesting thing. It's something different to everybody depending on where you hang your hat every day, isn't it?
Yep. My friend Carl Perkins, he was one of those folks back in the day that actually was able to transform country into something that worked for him. He pretty much transformed it into rockabilly. One of the first records he heard on the radio was a record was a song he was playing live every night. It was Blue Moon of Kentucky, but the way he learned it was, "Ah, blue moon of Kentucky, won't you keep on shining? I don't know one's gonna let me do." And of course, Bill Monroe's "Blue moon of Kentucky, keep on shining." So it's almost like the reverse of that sort of honest, straightforward thing. It's like, all right, let's take it and let's don't make it more country. Let's jazz it up, So, so yeah, country is it's an honest feeling thing. And the feeling has got to be there. The singer's got to feel it, and the audience, the listener, has got to feel it. So.
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, you talk about Nashville. You came up through Belmont University, which is one of the premier music business and recording schools in the country, especially for people who are interested in a career in country music. How did you learn of that program, and how did you know it was for you?
Well, these guys in this group I was with, they were called the Knott Brothers because we were Knott Brothers. They were going there. One of them had just graduated, and one of them was still going there. So they introduced me to the dean, so I went over there and enrolled, and I got into the school and everything. And it was really a good education. And once again, it was another part of learning the music industry because Belmont was the very first college. It was a college at the time. They were the very first college to develop a curriculum geared specifically for recording arts and entertainment. And, you could get a degree in that, which was, 40 years ago or 50 years ago was unimaginable. But a guy named Cecil Scaife, who was working for Columbia Records at the time, got together with a guy who was a musician, a songwriter, and a teacher, and a friend of his. And they sat down because Cecil was really interested in doing something on the educational level there in Nashville. And Bob Malloy said, well, we need to develop a curriculum here where we can draw students in who are musicians who want to get a degree. And Cecil was fascinated by this. So they developed they developed the entire curriculum. I mean, it was a trial and error thing, but by the time they got done, you could take a music industry course 101, you could take publishing and copyright, you could take recording arts, and you could roll it all into your degree. Basically, you would spend your time learning about copyrights and copyright management and copyright law. You would learn about music industry, how to conduct yourself in a meeting, all these different points of things. You got a lot of seminars. You got a lot of people who came through who were music power brokers who would come in and give seminars, and students would get to meet these folks one-on-one. And it helped them because once they graduated, they could either get internships or they could actually contact these people and say, I met you at Belmont, and it was always a good open door for them. So it created a wealth of opportunity that probably wouldn't have happened for younger people trying to get in the music industry, because everybody, when I moved to Nashville, everybody who had record deals was either at the age of 30 or older. There wasn't anybody under the age of 30 who was making hit records, So yeah. This sort of opened that door, so to speak. Belmont did.
What were some of your biggest takeaways from your time there?
I think the biggest takeaway was being in Mr. Malloy's class, because He was almost like a history teacher in a way. They had a curriculum. They had a book. There was a book that had been written around that time. It was called This Business of Music. And he used that basically as his primer. But then he would go off of it, and he would start telling, because he knew so many different stories about artists and about situations and about record labels and about deals and all this kind of stuff. He had a vast knowledge of all this stuff. So I learned so much about him as to basically what to stay away from, what to probably put my efforts into, and what ultimately I needed to figure out, which was, what is it that you really want out of this? Sure, everybody wants to be famous. Sure, everybody wants to be rich. But seriously, he was basically saying, seriously, you have to find something that you love about this, because all those rewards, he said, they don't matter. If you don't love it, they don't matter. And to this day, I tell people, don't get into the music industry unless you love it, because if you don't, you're going to be wasting your time. You're going to have your expectations are going to get blown no matter how far you get. There'll always be something that you feel like you should be doing or you haven't done or whatever. Just do it because you love it. If you love it first, all that other stuff will come to you, and I feel like I'm kind of a living example of that, even though I'm not living in Nashville anymore. I don't have to do anything in Nashville. There's nothing for me to do there, but there's a lot for me to do here in Texas. And most everything that I learned to do or was able to participate in, people I performed with on stage, people like Hank Williams Jr. and Bruce Springsteen and Vince Gill and Shenandoah and just all these different people I was able to open shows for and do things with. I learned things from them. I learned things. I'll tell you a real quick story too. I don't know how much time we got. Barbara Mandrell. You know who Barbara Mandrell is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Barbara Mandrell. Okay. When you're in Nashville and you're in the music industry, the one thing that you should probably try to do is you should probably try to learn how to do everything you can. Do every job that comes along that's entertainment related. Well, I learned how to do sound for video. My brother was a videographer and a filmmaker there in Tennessee. And so we landed a gig one day where we were doing a infomercial for Barbara Mandrell's record. She didn't have a deal, but she had backers and they were doing an infomercial. It was going to be a double album. So, the infomercial records that came out, there was a wave of them that happened for a while there. People would buy them, dialing up a 1-800 number or sending money in. So here I am, I show up, I'm the sound guy, right? Now, as the sound guy, you have to have an intimate relationship with whoever it is that you're miking up, because you're probably going to have to be putting the mic up through their blouse or somewhere on their body somewhere. So I'm working with this lavalier mic with Barbara Mandrell. Now, at the time, I was playing in a rock and roll band, and my hair was purple, and I was wearing this weird looking T-shirt and everything. And here I'm in this recording studio where we're setting lighting up, and all these guys that are in there, they're all the investor guys. They've all got suits on and ties and everything, and they're really looking at me like, what is this guy doing in here? This guy looks like he crawled out of a garbage can. I'm going to tell you something. I sat there, and as I was miking Miss Mandrell up, she looked right at me. She says, "Can I tell you something?" I said, "Well, sure, ma'am." She says, "I think your hair is just so cool looking, man." She says, "That is just awesome." She couldn't have given me $1 million and made me feel better about myself at that point. And it hit me. The people who are great artists, they have a way of making people feel good about themselves. Garth Brooks is a big star these days because he built his reputation and his career on remembering people's names after the show. His meet and greet was probably the best meet and greet that any artist has done in 100 years. He would remember people's names. They'd go back to a venue. He'd remember their names. He'd remember their kids. He would remember what their kids did. His mind is like this huge Rolodex, and people went, "Wow, this guy he cares. He remembers me." That's important to folks. That's really important. So I learned a valuable lesson like that. And those are the kind of things that Mr. Malloy would teach. Learn to do something that's gonna. If you're going to be an artist, learn to do something that's going to make people feel like that you care and that you're wanting to do something for them. anybody can kind of stand in the spotlight and, have a lot of adoration poured on them. But if you can pour adoration out equally or better than what you're getting, you're really going to go somewhere, and I found out that any gig I ever do, I'm always looking to find that person that I'm reaching. If I'm reaching them, I'm doing my job. So those are the kind of things I learned from Mr. Malloy. So there you go.
At that time, you were growing as a songwriter. What did that look like, and how did you see yourself evolve?
Writing songs got to be a very bad thing for me for a while, because when you're in Nashville or when you're in the music industry and you're in a music industry driven environment, you get a lot of voices, a lot of people telling you this, and a lot of people telling you that, and you hear this and you hear that and you hear that, and you keep thinking, what can I do to make this, or what can I do to make that? Well, after a certain point of time, you're either going to get completely frustrated and you go, I don't even know what I'm doing, so I give up. Or you're going to say, you know what? I think I've heard enough. I'm just going to do what I can live with and what I love. And if that's just not good enough for anybody else, then it's still good enough for me. So they tell you, or they don't tell you a lot of times, the best thing that you need to try to do, or that you need to pursue, is always be true to yourself. Find yourself. If you find yourself and you'll be true to yourself, then what you say and what you do can only be perceived as being honest and true. If you are making it up because it's cute and all that kind of stuff, you might get somewhere, but more than likely 10 years from that moment, you're going to go, I can't stand to listen to that because it's silly, So I try to remain true to that. I'm going to do what feels right to me. And the reason why I say that is because if you spent as much time in the music industry as someone like I have, then you have learned a lot. You've learned a lot about crafting. You've learned a lot about kind of what works and what doesn't work. But you try to let it drive you subconsciously. You try not to be so conscious of it that it sort of messes up your creativity. I tell people all the time, they go, man, how did you write that song? I said, I just got out of the way and let it write itself. Because, there's no way I could have come up with that on my own.
Right. I guess it's almost like being a golfer. Once it starts getting in your head, man, it messes with everything, doesn't it?
I use that all the time. I tell people all the time. People say, how is it that you play guitar so well? I don't play as well as I'd like to, but I tell people, look, my buddy Carl Perkins, who is considered one of the greatest guitar players and influences in the world, every day that he was at home, he had his guitar in his hand. He had his television in their living room. He had a guitar sitting on the stand. He had a Bible sitting on the nightstand next to his guitar. And he would pick up the guitar, and as he was watching a television program, he would just noodle with his guitar. He just had it in his hands all the time. That way, when it got to be the time where he had to deliver the goods, it was automatic. He didn't have to think about it. Same thing as like a great golfer. You can be a good golfer. You can be talented. You don't have to practice that much. But if you're going to be great, you gotta hit them practice balls so much that your hands are in the shape of a golf club. And once you get to that point, it just works, And I, to tell you the truth, to this day, I can't tell people, I don't know why it works, but I know I've done it enough and I keep doing it enough to where it just kind of flows. So.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you brought up Carl Perkins. Tell us a bit about how he came into your life and what that influence meant to you.
Well, I had a friend that I was writing songs with, a lady named Dottie Moore. She was writing songs for Gary Morris. And I got introduced to her, and no relation, by the way, but we tell each other that we're brother and sister by choice. And Dottie had been writing songs with Carl. And so I wasn't aware of this actually, because we had just written a song together. And she really liked what I was doing. She asked me point blank, she said, do you think you'd ever like to go down to Jackson, Tennessee and write songs with my friend Carl Perkins? And I said, how fast can I run to get there, Dottie? She says, well, let me arrange it. So she arranged it. I went down the first time and I met Carl's daughter, Debbie. And so we sat down and we worked on a couple songs, and it went really well. And she said, well, you have to come back when Dad's here. He's on tour right now, but I'll tell you when he's going to be back. So sure enough, I went back when he was there, and it was really, it was kind of a meeting that was almost otherworldly. Because first of all, when I first saw him, he was walking towards me. He had a little studio behind his house. He has a swimming pool, and then he's got a big little shack down there by his pool where he built his recording studio to do his home recording stuff. So he comes walking toward me across the yard, and I could have sworn it was my dad. My dad was still alive, but he was dressed like my dad. He carried himself like my dad. And I just thought, I feel like I'm seeing a vision or something here. And of course, came up to me, and I had this really ugly looking beat up guitar that I brought in. And he kind of laughed at it and just kind of made me feel good about it. You know, he said, well, I'm sure it'll sound all right. And sure enough, we wrote a song that day called Blood Brothers. And it was a great little song. And we had catfish later on that evening, and we talked, and we just became really, really fast friends. And I spent a couple more times with him. And after he had passed away, Debbie had told me that Carl would always ask about me. And I thought, he would ask, of all the people, he would ask, how's Randy doing? When's he going to come back down? You know, you need to stick with that boy. You know, she would tell me these things, and I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned, you know, but the guy, he was one of those guys, and you've met people like this. I know you've met people like this, especially being around farmers and stuff like that. He could size you up in 5 minutes. He knew in 5 minutes, he knew if he liked you. And if he liked you, he would break his arm off to do something for you. If he didn't, he wasn't mean or anything. He just wouldn't have a whole lot to do with you. He'd be polite, you know. But if he liked you, look out, man. You had a friend for life, you know. And that was Carl. He was a friend, you know. I love the guy. I missed him. I wish he was still around, because, you know, he could still go out there and do it, even up to the day that he died or up to the day he had a stroke. He was still going out there and just killing them. You know, he really was it as far as it goes. So
another guy along those lines, everything you're talking about, from muscle memory to how he sizes me up. You know, we've been talking for a while here, but before we go any further here, I want to share a song from you. And this is a special video to me because it comes from the Ernest Tubb Midnight Jamboree a few years back. And in it, you're being introduced by our mutual friend, Glen Douglas Tub, who we lost a couple months ago. And he was very much that same kind of guy, you know.
Totally.
That muscle memory, you know, even though his body was failing him, the second he got up on that stage, you wouldn't know it, man. He said it like he did, you know, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, when I was going back and looking at this for the show here, to hear him and see him, that was a really special deal here. And I know he was kind of a mentor to you and to me as well here.
Yep.
And absolutely the proud nephew of the great Ernest Tubb, and an iconic songwriter in his own right. And what was that experience like, getting to know him?
You know, Glenn was he first got introduced to me after actually hearing that song, Sunshine State of Mind. He told the lady that's my promotions manager now, Jenny, he said, I really like that song. I want to meet that guy, you know. So it was really him wanting to come and see me play, and him and Dottie came in to see me, and then they came back, you know, a couple times. So he actually came in to listen where I was playing 2 or 3 times in Nashville. And it was always a great experience, because it never failed. I go, Glenn, how you doing? He says, well, I guess I'm making it for an old man. I don't know. He was always had the same kind of answer. And I knew it was coming, but every time he said it, I would just laugh, because I just thought, man, there is so much going on in there. This guy, he was so like, he was like a walking Mount Rushmore is what he was, man, you know, but to be his friend, and because you know, he didn't pull any punches. He didn't blow any smoke whatsoever. I mean, honesty was like, it was spelled with capital letters with Glenn. So I loved being around him, though. So he's a great guy. And then, of course, when he did one of these midnight jamborees, he wanted me to be on it. He said, I need you to be the band leader. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to need a song list. We can't just launch into these things like you can. So I organized all the stuff. I did all the charts. I got the band together. And so I wanted to make him, proud to be up there with him, because it was really that was a great moment. That was really a lot of fun doing that show. So anyway, anybody who sees this, I'm pretty darn tickled to death to be up there. So.
Well, when you talk about him actually wanting to come back to see you again, I've been around him plenty when he talked about what he didn't like, and he would sniff that out in a second. So the fact that he gave you enough of an endorsement to come back again, that's something special.
Oh yeah, loved him, great guy, loved him to death. So yeah, I miss him. I miss being around him, because we've actually been around. We've done quite a few. We did a few of those things at the Commodore, a few of those songwriter things there, and it was always so much fun. Of course, I was always trying to get there early because I wanted to make sure I helped him, because he had trouble getting around. I'm telling you. I mean, that guy, he was a never say die guy. He wouldn't quit. I mean, he would have crawled onto that stage if he had to. So.
When you brought up your publicist, Jenny, I want to say a special hello to her. She's fabulous, does great work for you, and appreciate her efforts tonight. And before we go any further here, I want to roll into this. This is one here from our friend Randy Seymour. This is Sunshine State of Mind.
He's a great singer and entertainer and a good songwriter, and he's making some good records now, because he's got a couple that's really been up in the charts, and he's up there fighting with the big boys now. And Randy Moore, which one you going to do for us first?
We're going to go to the beach.
Okay.
Here's a little song about going down to the beach when the weather gets cold. Anybody thinking about going somewhere warm?
Oh boy.
This will do it right here. It's called Sunshine State of Mind. Thank you, Glenn. Snowflakes are falling, roads are getting icy and slick. Anyone who says they love winter weather has got too much bull on their ship. Me, I'm not hanging around, I'm getting out of town. Gonna fly south with the geese. Enjoy your ice fishing, all your fishing, while I take a walk on the beach. Hey, hey, hey. Leaving the world behind. Hey, hey, hey. Bye, 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 bye. I'm in sunshine, state of mind. What is the business? Working my life to death, 95 hours a week. Too much month at the end of the month. There's not enough rum in my drink. My bones are aching to get half naked. Plant my butt square in the sand. Hang up the phone, I hear paradise calling. Come to vacation land. Hey, 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 hey. Bye, 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 bye. I'll be watching the waves laid up in the shade. Tequila, salt, and lime. Hey, hey, hey. Bye, 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 bye. I'm in sunshine, state of mind. What got him? Where we can make love by the sea. Avenues, cell phones and clocks. It's time to be free. Everybody say, hey, 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 hey. I want to hear you. Hey, 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 hey. Hey, 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 hey. Bye, 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 bye. hope we dream by the time. Hey, 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 hey. Bye, 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 bye. I'm in the sunshine, state of mind. You know I'm in the sunshine, state of mind.
Great one there. I love it.
I forgot how much fun I had on that one.
The great Texas troubadour Lynn Owsley on steel guitar and Bronson
Yeah.
Hermuth on harmonica there. Great band.
Yeah, Jerry Ray Johnson on the drums. He's a friend of mine. He basically he does some personal management for me, and he and I have been friends for years. And I'm trying to think, the guy on the bass, can't remember his name right now, but he used to play with Eddie Rabbitt all the time. He was Eddie Rabbitt's bass player for years. It'll come to me later on. So
if it does,
yeah, it was a lot of fun.
If it does, just shout it out. I want to give those guys recognition where we can. Here, but great bunch of folks there. My only disappointment in that video is that music stand wasn't about a foot shorter there. So
I know. I looked at him going, oh man, I can't see Glenn. You know, because he had that thing shoved up right next to him so he could see what was going on.
Absolutely. You know, and he played that show just 3 weeks before his passing. You know, just right down to the end, and sounded just as good.
Yeah. He never, like I said, and that's really the way that artists, music artists. I mean, heck, I think Frank Sinatra probably played a show and walked off the stage, and a month later he was gone. So, So, you know, singers, and I tell people all the time, there's no retiring. You know, you don't retire from this.
Yeah,
you might slow down, but you don't retire.
well, along those lines, though, I mean, it is a business of highs and lows. How do you stay motivated to keep going when you're in some of those valleys?
Well, you know, I find things to do. Like I said, this past year, when all this stuff slowed down immensely, it afforded me the luxury to sit down and really explore some new songs and really do some things I hadn't been able to do for a while, because when you are playing live a lot on a weekly basis and you're going everywhere, you know, you used up there's a lot of energy, a lot of that creative energy that would, you know, go into sitting here and crafting a song or something coming into your head or hearing a song in your head. It's going into not only just playing the gigs and being out there, but, you know, the preparation for it, and then the getting back and decompressing from it. So, you know, there's a lot more stuff involved than just kind of showing up, plugging in and you know, doing your thing. There's a whole, so it takes up a lot more time to do that. So, I haven't had a whole lot of, to tell you the truth, I mean, I don't know that there was ever a whole lot of valleys that have ever existed, especially in the last 5, 6, 7 years. I've been really fortunate to have been busy and not be famous at the same time. So, which I'm glad. You know, I see these folks who are famous, and the ones who are really famous, I mean, they don't really have a life. You know, their whole existence belongs to whatever it is that they do. You know, I kind of doubt that Carrie Underwood can just, you know, take any day off she wants to take and go out to the lake and go fishing. You know, just ain't gonna happen. You know,
Right.
There's too many people dependent on that. You know, so I'm fortunate that I'm in a position where I don't mind, you know, when things slow down a little bit. I like, to tell you the truth, I don't even know why I got into this, because I really don't like traveling. You can ask my wife. Every time I'm fixing to go somewhere, she goes, well, I can tell you're fixing to go somewhere. You're not in a very good mood.
It's just the travel. The getting there is fun. It's just
yeah.
Well, you know, one of the things you did during the COVID period was up and move from Nashville, Tennessee, back to Texas to Lufkin.
Yep.
What prompted that?
Well, I'd been wanting to move back to Texas for a while, really ever since before my dad passed away, because he was always talking about going back to Texas. My folks both loved it here, and I came back to do a couple of different things and stayed for a week or so, and my wife actually came with me. And she got Texas crazy, and I couldn't believe it. She was going nuts over being here. We went out to the hill country and then went down to Houston, around the places where I grew up and everything. And it the whole place just reminded me of so many good things that got me started out doing what I love to do, playing music, and it just felt like there was more of me here than there was anywhere else in the world. So I made a conscious effort to come on back, and it took a while. It kind of got rocky on the front end, but then on the back end, it just worked out. I was researching a place to live because we had fallen out of a couple places we were looking at, and I was looking at for a place in Nacogdoches, Texas, which is a big college town. SFA's over there, and there's a lot to do. So I thought, well, that might be a good place to go, play music or whatever. So this house that I'm living in now, which is in Lufkin, which is about 30 minutes south of Nacogdoches, was the first thing that came up. So I looked at it and I showed it to my wife and I said, these real estate pictures, they always mess you up because they always look bigger in the pictures than they do when you get there. She said, well, I think we need to go check this one out. So we took a whole Sunday, came down here and looked at it with an agent, and we couldn't believe it. It looked better than it did in the pictures. And we thought, wow, this is great. So we just ended up buying it, and we were living in Nashville. We were still working, but when everything happened like that, we were actually in an apartment, and she looked at me after we had closed on this house. She looked at me about a week or so later, and she said, well, I don't know why we're living in two places and not working in either one of them. I said, well, can we get out of this apartment? She goes, yeah, we can get out of it. So we got ourselves out of the whole apartment thing and just moved lock, stock, and barrel. 2 or 3 weeks later, after she said that, here we were. It was like April. I think it was mid-April when we really got everything finally hit the ground here. But it's been the best thing I've ever done in my life up to this point, moving here. And it was real seamless. It was real easy. So the whole thing felt like it was really blessed by God, and felt like that Jesus was in it the whole time. And so it worked for me, it worked for her, and everybody that I know says, man, that's really one of the best things I've ever seen you do. I've seen a bigger change in the positive for you since you've been there. And I said, well, it's pretty easy because I love it here. So I'm a Texan at heart,
And that's it's a killer music scene out there right now.
Well, and it always will be, because, and I'll tell you why. I learned this early on when I was making records and I was down in Houston. I don't know how it is now, but when country music was being sold in record stores and the like, the market share of what was being sold country music wise, over 70% of it was being sold in Oklahoma and Texas. 70% of the profits of country music sales, airplay, record sales, tapes, concerts, the whole thing, over 70% of it was in this region. That's a big deal. That's a big chunk for a business. That's like saying, over 70% of the toy trains are going to be bought by kids who are 8 years old. Well, I'm going to sell it to kids who are 8 years old then.
Right.
So so Texas has that music thing. It's always had that music thing. It's changed, but it's never seemed to complain about the changes. It just kind of goes with it and says, hey, yeah, all right, let's do this. That's cool.
And good for a place for a guy who doesn't like to travel, because you can do a whole world's worth of shows and not ever leave the state.
Yeah, everything's a few hours instead of a day away. Although there are places that are a day away from here, believe me. You're going to go out to West Texas, to El Paso or Sweetwater or Lubbock or something like that. You just better just go ahead and carve a day and a night out for it.
Just looking at your schedule, 15 dates in July alone, and all those in Texas. And then, you got more coming up here. What's the rest of the year looking like for you?
I'm going to be doing a couple of Opries down in Houston and Pearland and Sugar Land and in Alvin, Texas. Those are all in the Houston area. I'm playing in places like Canton and Carthage. I'm playing at Carthage. I'm doing a show at the Texas Country Music Hall of Fame and Tex Ritter Museum. I'm going to be hosting a gospel show there on a Sunday morning with people like Mo Bandy and Linda Davis and folks like that, maybe singing there. I don't know. It's they're there for like 3 or 4 days, and then on the Sunday they do a Sunday gospel show. And so whoever wants to participate in the gospel show, so I don't know who's going to show up. It could be me and this thing right here, or it could be me and everybody. So I'm expecting to have a big time. So I'll be doing that. I'm going down to do a television show in Kemah next week, which is down in Galveston area. Traveling just pretty much a lot of the eastern part of the state, Central Texas, Eastern Texas, getting around Kilgore, Waco, just here, there. I mean, it's getting to be a lot of push pins on the map of Texas. So, and I'm happy to do it because I seem to be showing up at the right places and doing the right things. So I'm happy about that.
Well, back in January, we talked about this earlier. You released your latest album, which was titled Lufkin, after your town there. Tell us about the project.
Well, when I got here and we got settled in, I was I got my studio set up, and I had recorded. There was one song I had recorded in Nashville that had a track. It was a tracking session I'd done, and I thought, well, I need to finish that. I had already talked to the guy I'd written the song with. It was called Big in Texas is the name of the song. And I wrote it with this guy, David Lee. And we had originally written this song 25 years ago, had a different title, and the chorus was different. But all the verses were exactly the same. And I called him and I said, David, I think I have a way to fix this song. He said, well, I didn't know it was broken. I said, yeah, it feels like it is. So I ran the idea by him and he loved it. So I went ahead and finished it up here. And then in the process of finishing that song up, all these other songs started jumping into my head. The song about going fishing, which had been around for a while, that jumped in there. And I have a thing about recording songs. I don't like to do them unless it feels like the right time to do them. You know, some of the songs on Lufkin have been around for a while. Some of them were brand new, but simply by the way that I did the record, they all sound like they came out of the same 2 months worth of work, but they're really spread out over like a 25-year period. So a lot of the songs, a few of the songs on there are songs that they just came back to me and I went, this is a good time for this song. And then the other songs were like brand new. And I was like, this is a new idea. This is a new thing. This is what's happening in my head, and I hear everything, and I would just go with it. And I've got to where that's the thing that works for me best, is just going with what's personally just coming out of me, not trying to aim the song at something, and not trying to take some sort of a current event or idea and turn it into some novel musical performance. You know, I'm just not good at that. Some people are great at it. I'm not. So there you go.
Well, you mentioned Big.
That's how the album came about. So
you mentioned Big in Texas. That's one of the real poignant cuts on this album. Tell us about the inspiration behind that song.
Well, David and I sat down in Nashville 25 years ago. We were writing for a little publishing company there that was run by the guys who were managing John Michael Montgomery. And, you know, of course, most of the guys and gals who were writing there, that's who we were wanting to write songs for, because John Michael was a big, big deal back then. But this one we wrote, and we didn't even know who we wrote it for. We were thinking maybe even a George Strait or something like that, because it did have that kind of feel to it. And so the story of the song really kind of came out a lot of David's experiences, his life, so to speak. The parts about, you know, the tree out in the front yard where his daddy used to work on cars and things like that. Well, that's definitely from David, because my dad couldn't work on cars at all. My dad was a pilot. He never got under the hood of a car that he didn't have to go ahead and take it to a mechanic, because he didn't know what he was doing. So the story of the song felt so good and felt so right to us that we finished it. And it was based in the idea that I told him, I said, David, I went back home not too long ago, and I walked through my old elementary school, and I couldn't believe how small the halls were and how everything was so small. And I thought everything was so big back then when I was a kid. You know, it just seemed like massive. And so that was the idea, is we were talking about how things seem like when they're big, when you're a kid or when you're younger, you get older and you look at it from a different perspective, and all of a sudden it's all different. And it, to use more of a metaphor, things that seem like they were large aren't really all that big at all. They if they seemed insurmountable, they almost seem like they're too easy to overcome, later on. So that's where the song sort of emulated from. But the title was never right. The chorus was never right until I was driving through Texas one night, and I stopped at this convenience store, and it had a big blue state of Texas on it, and the name of the store was called Biggs. And I remember always talking about people saying things are bigger in Texas. And I went, oh my God, there it is right there. Big in Texas, bigger in Texas. So that just kind of rolled around in my head. And by the time I got to where I was going with my wife, I sat down and I wrote the chorus. And then I called David up about the week later and I said, you got to hear this. I sent it to him and he went, man, you're right. That's it. I didn't know it was broken, but that's definitely it. So that's kind of how the song sort of got finished, so to speak, 25 years later. So, and I tell people, if you have something that you love, if it's a song, don't give up on it. Maybe it's just not the right time, or maybe there's just that one little thing that just hasn't hit you yet. It'll get there.
I love that inspiration. And I want to roll this video here. It's an acoustic version of this song here. 25 years in the making. This is big in Texas.
Mama called last Monday, so I packed my Sunday best. Drove back to my hometown to lay some things to rest. As I pulled into the gravel drive, 1,000 memories came alive. Somehow our old house had changed. From the oak tree in our front yard where Daddy used to work on cars, to the back porch where Mama liked to swing. Things ain't as big in Texas as they used to be when I left them. Looking back, I can see they were larger than life now to me. The shadows they cast were so tall, I thought they'd never, ever fall. Now I've come back to see things ain't as big in Texas as they used to be. Daddy was a working man. Work was all he believed. So we didn't see eye to eye when I left home to chase a dream. We built a wall of foolish pride to prove who had the rider side. For some years we never even spoke. But the day the walls came tumbling down as we laid Daddy in the ground, it's taking time and tears for me to know things ain't as big in Texas as they used to be when I left them. Looking back, I can see they were larger than life now to me. The shadows they cast were so tall, I thought they never, ever fall. Now I've come back to see things ain't as big in Texas as they used to be. Things ain't as big in Texas as they used to be.
Another beautiful one. I love it.
We shot that one right here, actually. So in the house.
So any other special projects that you've got on your plate here, on your bucket list or on the horizon?
Well, I've never done this before, but I'm doing it this year. I've got a Christmas album that's going to be coming out in late October, early November. It's got a song on there that I've covered for quite a few years and has gotten a lot of airplay on the different international stations and stuff. It's a version of Little Drummer Boy. And then I've got quite a few songs that have been laying around for a while, original songs, and then some other songs. I've got a version of Silent Night that's on there that's kind of different. It's I sang half of it in German and half of it in English because it's originally was written in Austria. It's and then there's a Roger Cook song on there called All I Want for Christmas Is Peace, which is a great song. Roger's a great friend. It's going to be an album that I never really wanted to do a Christmas album because there's been so many that's been done. And if you're like me and you listen to Bing Crosby's Christmas album or you listen to Nat King Cole, you go, well, you can't do anything any better than that. Those are just some of the greatest Christmas records, greatest music ever recorded in the world that has to do with Christmas. And, but I came up with something that I felt right about doing. So I don't even know what the title of it's going to be yet, but it's going to be a Christmas album with my name on it, Randy C. Moore. So be looking for that. And then there'll be another album coming out next year sometime, co-produced. Actually, there's two albums in the can here. One of them will come out next year. It's a thing that I co-produced with my friend Norbert Putnam, who was a guy who did a lot of records with Jimmy Buffett and Dan Fogelberg and different people like that. And he's a big legendary musician from Nashville and from Muscle Shoals. So I don't know when that's going to appear. That may appear sometime in March next year, but definitely the Christmas album's going to hit last part of October, first part of November this year.
And I would assume people can go to your website and be looking at that or follow social.
Yep. The website, the www.randyinitialcmore.com, randycmore.com, like's been running under the screen there. You can find out where I'm playing and what I'm playing and how to get some of what I'm playing into your computer or onto your CD player or I've got flash drives now that I sell of my album. So, it's I've got stuff, but mostly I'm just happy to be able to go out and play and people enjoy what I'm doing because that's what I was put here for, to give people something they can enjoy with a little bit of music and maybe a few stories and something like that. Just something.
And that's why we wanted to have you on here tonight. And before we get out of here, will you give us one more to enjoy?
Oh, sure, man. Sure. I'll tell you what, let me do this song since I talked so much about going back to Texas. This is from my first album, actually. And I'll do this because I've always liked this song and it says a lot about me. It goes like this. He hit the highway at 17, fool's gold and elusive dreams. Looking back, the years left him stoned. He never liked it in Tennessee, just another place to leave, just another reason to be gone. Every day he talks about going back to Texas. Going back to Texas, going home. Every night he dreams about going back to Texas, packing up what's left of living, taking that good woman with him back to Texas, back where he belongs. He lost his folks at 55. Glory bound the tears he cried, washed away the youth inside his sow. With his hands on the wrecking ball, he knocked down those prison walls. Nothing's gonna keep him from that road. And every day he talks about going back to Texas. Going back to Texas, going home. Every night he dreams about going back to Texas, packing up what's left of living, taking that good woman with him, back to Texas, back where he belongs. Tomorrow he's gonna take her hand, lead her to that promised land, underneath those big old Texas skies. Oh, every day he talks about going back to Texas, going back to Texas, going home. Every night he dreams about going back to Texas, packing up what's left of living, taking that good woman with him, back to Texas, back where he belongs. Oh, back where he belongs, here in Lufkin. All right.
And eventually, life imitated art, huh?
Yeah, it did.
I love how that worked out.
It did.
Well, again, folks who want to follow your career, randyseymour.com. Also go follow him on Facebook and wherever he's at on socials. Get out to those shows and go download some of that music.
Appreciate you having me on tonight, Brent. It's been fun. Been a lot of fun. I wish you the best of luck too, son.
Well, I sure appreciate it, man. And, we want to thank you for taking the time to join us here on Inside Farm Life. And I'd love for you to come back anytime you want to share new music or just hang out.
You know, I enjoyed this well enough to actually do it again without having my arm twisted. How about that? Twist my arm. That's enough.
Well, I sure appreciate that. And we want to thank everybody else for joining us tonight. Hopefully we won't have to twist your arm to come back either. We'd love for you to come back anytime we got the doors open for you to learn more about agriculture or true country music. And in the meantime, I hope you'll check out the Inside Farm Life podcast, where each week we bring you agriculture industry newsmakers, hot button industry issues, educational features, and the best in true country music. You can find that link each Friday on the Farm Life Facebook page, and you can subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Deezer, Audible, and Odyssey. And before we go, we want to say a special thank you to the folks at AGCO, who are the presenting sponsor of all Inside Farm Life shows for the month of August. I hope you go check them out at the Farm Progress Show in Decatur, Illinois, here at the end of the month, where many of their fine products are going to be on display. You know, they have the Challenger brand, also Massey Ferguson, Fendt, and on and on. So make sure you go check them out, agcocorp.com.
AGCO. If you want your stuff to grow, AGCO.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. Also, we want to say a special thank you to our additional sponsors, Concept Agritech and Gateway Seed. Well, I tell you what, friends and neighbors, the clock on the wall says it's time for us to get on out of here. So for now, it's Brent Adams. Let's meet up here again next time, shall we? And hey, bring along a friend.
You've been listening to Inside Farm Life, a production of Farm Life Media. If you have topic suggestions for future episodes, drop us a line at brent@farmlifemedia.com. And be sure to check out our website, farmlifemedia.com.